Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, bad news for AMD, the ASUS STRIX TACTIC PRO mechanical keyboard, Broadwell Nooks, more fixes for the 840 EVO, and is M2 good to go? All that and more, it's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 304, recorded 2/26/2015. AMD, ASUS, Intel, and Samsung.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by IT Pro TV. Are you looking to upgrade your IT skills or prepare for certification? IT Pro TV offers engaging and informative tutorials streamed to your Roku, computer, or mobile device. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your account, go to itpro.tv/Twitch and use the code TWICH30.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most compelling, most irrational, and occasionally most offensive hardware technology coverage on the entire internet. We may not know if that dress is blue and black or gold and white, but boy, can I get into a fight about a DAC. I'm Patrick Norton. Joining me as always, Mr. Ryan Shrout from PCPro.com, who I believe is just as puzzled at the popularity of Mashable's blue and black versus gold and white dress article as I am. How you doing, man?
I don't pretend to get the stuff anymore. Earlier today, there were llamas there were llama gifs everywhere on Twitter. And now there's a clearly black and blue dress that people are claiming is white and gold. And I just don't understand the internet some days. And I just want to go to bed early and like have a warm glass of milk and watch Wheel of Fortune and go to bed, because that's what old people do when they don't understand things. That's where I'm at today.
Oh my goodness. You know, it occurred to me that as I'm looking at the script, that the stories would make a lot more sense if I actually had this week's tab open and not last week's.
304, not 303, right. Yeah. A lot of duplicates in this episode, Patrick thinks. A lot of duplicates.
Wow, man. We did a lot of this stuff last week.
It happens.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's been interesting. I get to an interesting comment on Twitter because I was looking at these High Resolution Technologies did a couple of DACs, digital analog converters, one that's designed to plug into Android devices and your laptop and 30-pin iPhones, and this one that's designed to plug into the iPhone 6. And I'm convinced that it opens up the soundstage and makes the audio sound a little bit better. And you know, the iPhone 6 is really good, but it's funny when you start talking about subtle audio stuff. And when you start researching it, you want to talk about listening to a lot of fluff on the internet. Boy, people come up with some outlandish theories to justify their opinions, possibly even myself included, which is why I love the fact that you use science to answer questions.
I try so hard some days. It would be easier to do with the not science method, which is clear. But yeah, we do our best sometimes.
Yeah, well, especially you get into like high-end. It's not like there's a lot of like $15,000 video cards out there that do the exact same thing performance-wise as a $1,000 video card, which you could get into in the whole digital analog converter. You know, you don't really have true musical comprehension until you've sampled a $7,000. You know, it's like, okay, I got it. You're basically saying I can never listen to music properly because I don't have all the money.
192 kbps, buddy. 192 kbps.
Yeah, that's even I can't get on board that bandwagon pretty hard. I will say this sounded really nice. I will also say that the onboard DAC in the iPhone 6 sounds really, really nice. A little bit more of a soundstage on this. Or maybe I'm just looking for a reason to justify spending $60 for yet another DAC. Because this would make like my 8th DAC at this point. Anyhow, congratulations to HRT and their latest Kickstarter. The ASUS STRIX TACTIC PRO, speaking of things that are not internet hooey, unless you hate mechanical keyboards, in which case you're going to hate this story and you should just fast forward about 1.5 to 2 minutes. The ASUS STRIX TACTIC PRO is a, quote, premium mechanical gaming keyboard featuring Cherry MX Brown switches and some serious style. Sebastian Peak wrote this up at PCPro.com. It's kind of funny. Like I was actually really compelled by this keyboard, not because I thought the style was serious, not to take anything away from that, because this has that feel kind of like a Razer mouse, where you're like, somebody was thinking, how can we make this look like a control in a spaceship?
Right.
But I was admiring those extra three, I guess, programmable buttons below the keyboard, M11, M12,
Yeah,
and
below
M13.
the space bar.
Yeah, I was like, I like that. I don't think I'd ever use in any game I've ever played because,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't
that
know.
good. But I was like,
Sebastian said that he kind of liked them, and
it's something new.
I can't think of a specific example, but you're right. It's something new. It's something different. That it's like, oftentimes you have that thumb down there. It's not really doing anything else. So give it more functionality. Sure, I can go with that.
I don't know. I was very excited. I also got to say, if you haven't read Scott Michaud's article talking about the different Cherry switches, you should read it because it is awesome.
Yeah, it's very
although
good.
I still, my gaming keyboard is still a buckling spring keyboard that is almost as, actually it is older than my truck. That's a frightening thought. So outside of the really cool programmable buttons, what was the story on the Strix?
So this is kind of it's an ASUS keyboard. They don't, you don't really think of ASUS when you think of keyboards. It had a very he said it had a very high quality build feel to it, right? It was very heavy. It had like 8 rubber feet on the bottom of it, so when you put it on a desk, it was going to stay there. It's not an RGB keyboard. It does have backlight, but it's kind of an amber orange color that has variable brightness settings, but it's not an RGB keyboard. So some people were a little bit off-put by the price, considering it's not an RGB. It's a $150 keyboard, and you can get the Corsair K70 RGB for about the same price. But that thing aside, there are some, the build quality is very good. The key, obviously, it's a Cherry, and this is a Cherry MX Brown. I think it's available in a couple of other options there. The software is easy to use. The onboard macro recording, you can see the key there above the M11, 12, and 13 buttons. It's got multimedia controls. It's got like a volume roller, which I think are really nice on keyboards these days. And like I said, the software was easy to use, and he liked it enough to, even with that price, give it a gold award. So it's interesting to see ASUS kind of go into that realm. We also have an ASUS mouse that we're looking at. Sebastian's got that he's doing a little write-up on as well. And they've got headsets and the whole accessory kit. They're trying to expand outside of getting their gaming brand into more people's hands. I guess in this case, literally. Not just
or under more people's hands. What's the cost on this keyboard?
It is $150. It's steep. Okay. You can get mechanical keyboards for like 90 to 100, fairly regularly. And then when you start getting into the backlit and RGB, you start getting into the 120, 130, 150 range. So this is a little bit steep if you compare it to, the Corsairs and the Razers and the Logitechs that are out there using kind of comparable key switches or whatever. But, read the review, make that decision for yourself, figure out if the opinions that Sebastian put forth, or Sebastian does put forth, kind of match up with your own thoughts on input devices, and maybe it makes sense.
Maybe it makes sense. It's always nice when you can actually find a store where you can actually touch the keyboards. Although technically touching any Brown keyboard will give you a fairly good idea of what this keyboard's going to feel like under your fingertips.
Yep.
Dude, USB 3.1. I'm back and forth right now on whether to be excited about USB 3.1. In part because I'm looking at a display port on the side of this laptop right now. Hence my head turning around there.
Has a Thunderbolt logo on it?
No, it's got a DisplayPort logo, and it was really frustrating because I plugged a Thunderbolt cable into it to attach an external drive to it, and of course it's just a DisplayPort. It doesn't seem to do hard drives at all, which really ticked me off. Yeah, I wouldn't recognize the hard drive, and I was just like, and then I was like, okay, well at least I can do USB 3.0. I had to find a USB 3.0 adapter for this particular drive, and I didn't have one, so I ended up cracking the drive out of the case so I could attach it to a USB 3.0 adapter. And then I'm like, USB 3.1 performance sounds so badass, especially if you have an SSD, which ironically I have a 128 gigabyte SSD I'm going to use as an external drive. But then I'm like, crap, I'm going to need an adapter. I'm going to need an adapter for every machine. I'm not going to have adapters for my laptops. And it's rats. It's just like the early days of USB 3.0.
Yeah. So we actually talked a little bit about 3.1 last week, right? And it was with the MSI. It was last week, the week before, an MSI motherboard. ASUS sent us this, right? So this is what you really want, Patrick. This is, well, for your desktop, not for your laptop. This is a PCI Express add-on card that gives you 2 USB 3.1 ports here. And they're actually like aquamarine colored ports. You can see it better in the picture in the story, but that's on purpose. When I first got it, I was like, oh, the dye was off that day at the manufacturing plant for coloring. But they did that just to kind of differentiate USB 3.1 from the USB 3.0 ports on it. This is going to be $39. And while at first I thought they were going to try to restrict it to ASUS motherboards only, that turns out to not be the case. They're claiming that you'll get better performance on the ASUS motherboards, but you'll be able to run this in any third party, any other motherboard. And then they sent along with that a kind of prototype USB 3.1 enclosure that I didn't unscrew it, otherwise I'd show you the inside. It's got a Type-C connector for data, and on the inside you actually just have 2 mSATA Samsung 840 EVO SSDs that are running in a kind of a permanent RAID 0 configuration. And again, just trying to give you as much performance as possible to test the throughput of a USB 3.1 device. And as it turns out, this is actually a little bit faster than the motherboard implementation that we saw from MSI the previous week. ASUS has done something since the Z87, maybe Z77 platforms called like turbo USB, like USB turbo mode, that regular USB uses a bot transfer style, which is bulk only transfer, I think is what it stands for. And it doesn't have command queuing. It's not aware of multiprocessing or multi-threading, rather, anything like that. It's kind of a dumb back and forth. And it's fast for large, if you have a large file you're moving back and forth, that's fine. But if you have a bunch of small files, the overhead kind of gets in the way. So what ASUS has done is they have something they call turbo mode that tries to reduce some of the communication slowdown between a standard bot device, which is what this USB 3.1 enclosure actually is. It doesn't use UASP, and it attempts to improve the efficiency of that. And we actually saw that in our benchmarks. Trying to think here, so I don't have to think. I just have to scroll to the second page, where the difference is from 617 megs per second to 670 megs per second. In our file copy test, or if you look at the ADO results, it goes from like 795 to 832 or so. So you're seeing, a sizable increase in performance with the turbo mode enabled. But what is interesting is just the raw performance throughput. We're talking about 832 megabytes per second read, 834 megabytes per second write speeds through a USB 3.1 connection, which is clearly faster than USB 3.0. And we appear to be bottlenecked by probably the controller itself on this device. Early implementation, no UASP support, which is essentially native command queuing over USB. So we expect to see even a little bit better results out of these devices when they become available. But now we also saw in this story, if you look, there's a table there that kind of shows ASUS has not just the USB 3.1 add-on card planned for $39, but they're going to refresh 4 X99 boards and 4 Z97 boards with USB 3.1 on board. So if you're looking to build a system on one of these two platforms, it might be something worth waiting for, as well as ASUS and MSI and likely Gigabyte start to release a handful of refreshed motherboards using USB 3.1, so you can have those on board as opposed to having to use up a PCI Express slot on the motherboard for it. But if you already have a platform that it doesn't have USB 3.1, which would be everybody listening, being able to add it with this card is going to be nice if and when we actually get some devices available that will utilize the performance benefits and efficiency benefits of USB 3.1, which I think are more impressive than I had expected. Going into CES, not really knowing anything about USB 3.1, seeing a couple demos and going, oh, okay, that sounds interesting, and then getting sent some hardware and being, more impressed with how it all turned out and how well it seems to work already early in the stage.
It's been funny looking at the list of upcoming USB 3.1 devices expected mid-2015, which is also up on PC Per. You wrote this one up. And it's all drive enclosures, man. And docking stations.
Yeah, a lot of these are going to be available in March, right? As soon as next month. And there's a lot of them listed there with April. Then there's a handful of Q2, Q3. And they vary from a simple USB 3.1 to 2.5-inch hard drive enclosure to a USB 3.1 device, which would mean a native like USB thumb drive or something like that. And then there's a couple of them that list having multiple mSATA, multiple M.2 ports, which we don't really have the details yet. That could be either, they're going to run together in a RAID 0, kind of like the prototype devices we have here, or that, the possibility is there that maybe you have a USB 3.1 dock that has 2 hard drive bays in it. You can put 2 SSDs in externally, and you don't run them in a RAID, but you can access them independently, but you can actually access them at full speed because of the bandwidth that USB 3.1 has available. That'd be another use for it as well, is just kind of, if you have multiple external drives, you only have to have one connection in order to get kind of the peak performance out of those units. Otherwise, you have to kind of wait and see. It's kind of up in the air in terms of USB 3.1 devices, if they're going to be like native USB 3.1 controllers for SSDs, if someone's going to make a chip that can convert like M.2 PCI Express into USB 3.1. That sounds a little more complicated. Or mSATA into it, which is kind of what this is. But the controller here is RAID 0 of mSATA going into USB 3.1. So it looks like there are going to be more options than I expected there to be fairly quickly. So might make the $39 investment in the USB 3.1 card useful.
I wait with bated breath. I don't know. Yeah, it's I just need more SSD external storage because, that's what I need in my life is more hard drives.
I used this today. We were doing some testing on an XPS 13 with a small SSD. I wanted to install a bunch of games to it. And I just I have this. The XPS 13 doesn't have USB 3.1, obviously, but it has USB 3. Just installed all the games to this. It's like a 900 gig partition or something like that on it. It's like, oh, that's actually really handy for when you have an Ultrabook and you have external storage options for that. So I think USB 3.1 will only help in that regard.
I just realized my next upgrade for the laptop I'm using right now is going to be a larger drive because I'm frustrated. Yeah. It's been a while since I've been frustrated with the amount of storage on a laptop. But when I started realizing the size of the backups for my cell phone, I was just like, nope, it's time.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. If that's your primary machine, all of a sudden, yep.
Yeah, it's funny getting on the Crucial website and being like, oh, I can get one that big? Ooh. Nice. Can't upgrade the memory, but that's a soldering problem. Intel NUC5i5RYK SFF system review. Broadwell meets the Nook.
FFF.
There's just a lot of letters in that name.
Have you used any of these devices?
I've used them at trade shows, as bizarre as that probably sounds.
It's actually a really good idea. If you got to take a computer to do work on, that's about as convenient as you can get. You still got to have a monitor to go with it, but
yeah. Well, but I mean, I was actually thinking I've used them in vendor booths, actually at trade shows.
I gotcha.
They'd had that stuff running on them. I'm gonna just call it. It's a laptop in a box. I mean, it's basically the same amount of computing you would find in an all-in-one, basically strapped to the back of the monitor or in a laptop. Except it's in a box, so you can use it at home. You got more storage options.
Right.
I don't know. That's probably a cruel and heartless analysis of it, but They're pretty simple. They're pretty low power. You're not gaming on them. How did Broadwell do? I mean, was there any significant notice? I mean, I was actually more compelled by the, you know, the display port and looking at the back. I mean, I probably at this point really look at everything now that's got like a display port and HDMI and think, you know, streaming box for home theater. Although given that I'm running 1080p, I'm probably just as good with a $35 Raspberry Pi Model 2 as I am with a Broadwell Nook.
You know, the Broadwell part in this is it's faster than Haswell and it's more power efficient, but not by a dramatic amount. It's actually interesting because we looked at the Gigabyte bricks using Broadwell, and it actually has a Core i7 part. It's a dual core quad core. It's a dual core 4-thread processor in the bricks, the BX i7-H5500 there, but it actually has a faster clock speed than the Intel Nook. The Intel Nook has a Core i5 of 5250 processor in there, but the Nook has a higher end GPU. So it's kind of odd. The Bricks has a faster CPU. The Nook has a faster GPU. So basically in all of our CPU tests, like the Bricks is a handful of percentage higher, up to 10% or something like that, faster than the Nook, based on the same architecture, but with a different processor in there. But when you look at like our 3D Mark results, you get a little bit better GPU score out of the Nook than you do with the Bricks. So kind of an interesting combination there, an interesting comparison. But it's, you know, it's going to be, again, another handful of percentage faster than last generation's Nook, the D5-4250WYK based on Haswell. The main differences with this iteration are more, you know, you get the performance benefits, you get a little bit of a power difference there.
Right.
Internally, you no longer have to install a Wi-Fi card. It is built onto the PCB, so you get 802.11ac built onto the motherboard. You don't have to worry about buying that. The only thing you buy and add to this is memory and storage. And the memory is a pair of DDR3L SODIMMs, and the storage is it's an M.2 slot that supports both SATA and PCI Express. So you can, you know, and when they shipped the sample, Intel actually sent us an Intel SSD 530 series SATA-based M.2 drive, and then a Samsung XP941 PCI Express-based M.2 drive. And, you know, you go from about 540 megs per second read speeds to over a gigabyte per second read speeds when you're using the PCIe version of the storage device there, which is crazy to think about. In such a small device, you're getting a gigabyte per second, you know, SSD performance. You mean, again, you're basically looking at an Ultrabook innards, right? So, you know, MacBooks have PCI Express-based M.2, or maybe it's not M.2, but PCI Express-based SSDs in their system, and some other laptops do as well. So performance is incredibly impressive. But in this, you get Gigabit Ethernet, you get 4 USB 3.0 ports, HDMI, mini display port. It is extensible in that this cover comes off. The top cover will come off now, and you can, well, they have like the 3D models on their website. So if you have a 3D printer, you can download it, edit it, and print out a lid for it. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of people out there with a 3D printer, but the idea is to have vendors and resellers and system integrators kind of create their own lids for it. Like the Bricks had an NFC connector up top, right? Interface up top. You could do that. We saw some mock-ups that had like projectors, one that had a TV tuner on the top of it, which aids to the capability of it being a home theater PC, for example. You know, there's lots of things that you could envision attaching up there, and Intel has put a lot of like there's access to PCI Express, there's access to USB, and there's access to power, all kind of in that top area for somebody to build into. Yeah. Now the issue is will somebody actually do it? Will they release these things that actually extend the capabilities of performance? I think the TV tuner is far and away the best idea you've had, right? Because a lot of people might think this is cute and small and quiet and power efficient. We just put it on in the home theater area, whatever. But it doesn't really have a way to get broadcast into it, right? So you get like a TV tuner attached to it, kind of sits on top. Maybe it's got I don't know how many tuners it actually has in it, one coax connection, and it, you know, you've got that next step into it being kind of a fairly impressive home theater PC. You know, we're still waiting to see what other options they're going to come out with. This is the first iteration of the Broadwell one. If they're going to come out with like a Core i7 with a higher end GPU, or they're going to, I think they're going to come out with like another Braswell version that's kind of like the Atom based thing that's going to be less expensive, even more power efficient, a little bit smaller in that regard too, for people that want the size but they don't need the performance that a full on Broadwell core based design gets you. They're still not cheap, right? Like this is a $375 bare bones kit, and when you add an SSD and memory, you're looking at $500 to $530, and then if you don't have an operating system, you know, you're going to add another $90 on top of that. So if you look at the $600 to $650 range, it's not a budget selection for people, but it's still pretty neat.
You like them
Continues
a lot.
to be there. I do, but I understand the mentality for a lot of our readers or viewers that don't, right? Because it's not a fully configurable PC, and if you spend $650, you can buy a full-size case and an ATX motherboard and a low-end Intel processor and a discrete graphics card. You can absolutely do all that. This is just not targeted for those particular use cases. Bless you.
Pardon me. Yeah, no, it you know, there's a style element here. There's a space element here. There's a style. It's funny. It's not a, from a pure money standpoint, no, it doesn't win out. From a style or space standpoint, it gets a lot more compelling, especially if you're trying to hide the supply. I mean, is it using a wall wart for a power supply, or is it using a cable for a power supply?
It has a wall wart.
Okay.
Right. And I think in our power testing, it only really drew like 36 watts at the most or something. Awesome. So again, I mean, it is essentially, you know, a laptop innards without a display. Right. So I'm trying to, I don't have the plug here. I forgot what wattage it actually ran at. But yeah, maximum we were able to get it to was 36.6 watts, and that was running 3D Mark. So accessing both CPU and GPU resources in that case.
Cool.
Yeah.
You like the low power consumption, which makes it really competitive. It's just funny. Like I keep wishing they had more external storage options than USB 3.0, but I'm also kind of like small box server obsessed.
It's got Ethernet, right? If you have network storage, it's going to access it, you know.
I want to turn it into a server, I think is my problem. And they never give me like the connector I want for external boxes, which goes back to my lightning obsession.
Yeah. We have the original Nook with a Thunderbolt connection was acting as our file server for a very, very long time, connecting to an external Thunderbolt, you know, RAID array. So yeah, we can dream. Yep. I will dream on. Josh Raworth has the details for the AMD. Well, Josh Raworth wrote up AMD releases more Carrizo details. AMD's ISSCC 2015 presentation. What's going on there, man? I mean, this is really quick. There's not much that has changed since CES. Carrizo is their like low power, kind of like a mainstream notebook processor. It's the first CPU that's going to use the new Excavator core, right? So kind of an iteration on the CPU architecture side there. It's going to use a new generation of the AMD, you know, GCN Radeon graphics architecture. It is their first chip to integrate Southbridge functionality onto the die with the processor and graphics, right? So to make it's all one chip. Even if you look at like Broadwell inside the Nook, it is a CPU die, and then there's a separate die on the same substrate that is the Southbridge functionality. Not a huge difference there for the consumer, but it's an interesting design decision there. They talk a lot about, it's still based on the same 28 nanometer process tech. So there's not going to be any, I don't think there's going to be anything earth shattering in this, but they're talking about how they were able to improve the core design through these high density libraries, able to get power down, able to get space down, able to get die size down, while improving graphics and bringing in a new CPU core. Now the question will be is what does that CPU core actually translate into in real world performance benefits for any workloads that we're used to using. They've implemented some what they call AVFS, which is adaptive voltage frequency scaling. They have 10 of these kind of modules throughout the die that monitor power and temperature. And then they feed that back into some logic circuits that, balance the processor and figure out how high it can actually clock safely and based on the thermal limits. It's supposed to, kind of in a similar way to what Intel and Nvidia have done with their recent parts, is it's attempting to get the best out of each individual piece of silicon without having to dumb it down to the lowest common denominator every time, right?
Right.
Yet to see if that works, but it's also the first HSA 1.0 compliant hardware, for whatever that's worth. Offered from a 12 watt to a 35 watt TDP. This gives you an idea of where it's going to sit in terms of, maybe some big tablets, but mainstream notebooks is kind of the primary target here. So hopefully late Q2 of this year, we'll see some designs based on it.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what the performance on that is. I just, given how amazing Intel's been with power management lately, I think it's going to be a tough sell for AMD unless the part is incredibly inexpensive.
It's hard to see. To be fair, Intel is releasing 14 nanometer parts. This is a 28 nanometer part. That's a lot of that's a big gap in the technology side that you have to make up with logic and design and then pricing. So I'm very curious to see how AMD is able to address that stuff.
All right, AMD. Keep at it. You can get there. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. We should take a moment to thank our sponsor, IT Pro TV. And we've been talking about these guys for a while. They are fans of TWiCH. They kind of emulated the TWiCH studios. They like the idea of teaching via video, which probably makes sense to you guys because y'all watch video or listen to us. And they're essentially a video network that's dedicated to IT, information technology. Doesn't matter if you're looking to jumpstart a career in IT or if you're already working in the field. Their idea is like, yeah, we know you got the manuals, you're working towards certifications, but they want to supplement traditional learning methods like sitting in a classroom, staring at the teacher or reading a manual with a video environment, basically video learning. It's pretty simple. They got hundreds of hours of content. 30 hours are being added each week. Video courses on Microsoft, Cisco, Apple, A+, CCNA, Security Plus, MCSA, CISP, PowerShell, Linux Plus, network security, Linux, Windows, OS X support for the desktop, servers, and more. And the idea is that it's not going to be boring because the IT Pro TV hosts have been there and done that, and they've got great stories, and they share their experiences to help you kind of pay attention, retain more, learn more, and internalize it the way you really want to. It doesn't matter what you want to watch on your television, your mobile device, your Chromecast. During the live shows, you can interact with the hosts. They basically offer topic-specific web-based Q&As. It's pretty cool, and they've got over 10 years of experience in IT learning. They were inspired by Leo to bring their skills or to basically take their ability to teach people into a larger environment. And they're pretty convinced, like, even if you already have the book or are working on the certification program, this is a supplement that'll help you learn at your own pace, and just add more into the experience. More information, more experience can make you a better IT professional. They've got practice exams. They're measure-up practice exams to help you basically figure out if you're retaining the knowledge that they're hurling at you, which is a pretty good idea. Virtual machine sandbox, lab environment for hands-on practice, HTML5 support for any OS on that. It's pretty cool. You get all this for one low monthly price, which includes daily updates and new features monthly. It's comparable to the cost of a study guide and much cheaper than going to a full-on IT boot camp. Do us a favor, please check out itpro.tv/twitch. That's itpro.tv/TWiCH to upgrade your brand with the most popular IT certifications recognized by employers. You get a free 7-day trial when you sign up using our offer code, which allows you to check out their courses, the live streams, and more. Subscriptions are normally $57 a month or $570 for the entire year, but we've got a special offer because they are huge fans of TWiCH. If you sign up now and use the code TWICH30, that's TWICH30, you'll get 30% off your subscription for the lifetime of your account. That's less than $40 a month or $399 for the entire year. And if you stay there for over a year, you hit that 13 months, they'll reduce your subscription rate. They'll reduce your subscription rate even further, bringing the cost down to $24.95 a month or $249 for the entire year. itpro.tv/TWICH. Use the code TWICH30 to try it free for 7 days and save yourself 30% on a subscription. Do yourself a favor. Go out, upgrade your IT skills. Check out our sponsors, itpro.tv. We want to thank them for sponsoring this episode of TWiCH.
Indeed.
So Samsung promises another fix for the 840 EVO slowdown issue. I've got a 1 terabyte 840 EVO that I've just recently installed.
Inside this are two 840 EVO mSATA drives, actually. Yeah. So it was I think it was a few months ago we had the issue with the slowdowns for data that was just sitting on a drive, right? Data that it was written to the drive and then sat there, and as time progressed, reading it back became slower and slower. And they released a fix, what they said was a fix, that updated the firmware, and they had a restoration tool that essentially, from what we could tell, what it actually did was it took your data and it kind of reshuffled it. It didn't like defrag it or anything. It basically it rewrote every piece of data kind of over top of itself. It would, copy the data over here and then like clean up and then move it back. That's kind of how it did. And so everything was refreshed, if you will, and everything was running at its, the performance that you would expect. Well, over time, I guess it was a few weeks ago, we noticed again that people were reporting that their 840 EVOs were doing the same thing again, that it was slowing down, and that we were able to duplicate it with some of the drives that we had here. We purposely, this time, you wrote about 20 or 30 gigs worth of data to a handful of drives, then we put them away. We just left them alone. And then when we started seeing reports about this again, we pulled them off the shelf, plugged them in, and lo and behold, we saw the same thing. We actually sent one of our drives directly to Samsung with a full report of what we were seeing. And they came out with another statement now that says that in October they released the original tool. It effectively immediately returned the drive's performance to normal levels. They understand some users were experiencing it again. Samsung will release an updated version of the Samsung SSD Magician software in March, which is just their normal tool set, that will include a performance restoration tool. Now, they have not said that they basically don't know why it's happening. They don't know if it's a subset of these drives. It's like the early versions are doing it, the later versions were not. If it's a middle set that's doing it, although we have a combination of both samples that were original launch samples and samples that were received several months later that have seen it. So what it sounds like they're going to do is they're going to release the software that does the restoration. And the first time they released it, you could only run it one time. And then it was, once it had registered that you had run it, you could not run it again to, again, restore your SSD. And it seems like that's what they're going to do this time. So we're going to let you restore your SSD again, maybe, more than one time, right, to keep up with it. And either until they find a fix or instead of finding a fix, that will be the job that they put forward, right? So, thoughts? I
mean, so it sounds like it's essentially going to be at this point, it's going to be a polishing tool for your data.
It is.
I mean, is it slowing down your? Is it slowing down your? I mean, is it literally is it slowing down the boot time on your operating system because it's reading slower?
It's hard to say there because Windows does so many small writes to cache files and overwriting DLLs and changing things. It may not be affected in that way. But for example, if you installed Battlefield 4 6 months ago and all you do is you read those files. The only thing you save are save games. You're reading those files. The game would start up slower, the levels would load up slower. to some degree. And that would be where you'd see effectiveness. And I think it's a fair statement that most consumers, when they use these storage products, most consumers aren't writing to their drives a whole lot. They're reading from their drives a whole lot. You install a game and then you play it many, many times. You don't install a game and then delete it, and then install another game and then delete it, install another game and delete it. Most of the time, you have a handful of games that you're going to use very often, or applications or anything, right? And it's very possible, like even if you're like the example in that screenshot that we had on the story shows that, you know, read performance drops from like 470 megabytes per second, in our case down to like 250 megabytes per second, which is still really fast. And it's possible you may never notice it in real world usage unless you run some of the tools that kind of detect it. But there were clearly people that were noticing it in real world scenarios, and that's how we found it originally. So they don't have a fix, and this is something that like we're now kind of keeping tabs on this, on not just 840 Evo, but on the 850 Evo and the 850 Pro, like seeing if anything like this crops up. They have not yet. Like the 850 line is using a different architecture, and Alan doesn't think that it would succumb to the same drifting problems on a NAND basis that the 840 does. We just don't know now because nobody expected this to happen on the 840 to begin with. So if you have an 840 Evo and you think you are seeing slowdown issues again, wait until next month. They say they're going to have an updated version of the software that will let you do a refresh again, and maybe proceeding on into the future.
On the upside, at least we know from the SSD torture test that, you know, writing several more times to your drive over the course of a year is probably not going to create any problems. And for people who are kind of looking askance at their phone or their desktop, wherever they're watching or listening to the show, the idea of data polishing is kind of a big deal in magnetic storage, in large like, you know, data warehouses, NAS boxes, where essentially it goes through and periodically rewrites every single bit to the drive to basically boost the magnetism, or to max out sort of the magnetic detectability of a 0 or 1s. I'm not explaining it really well, but the idea is based on the it's kind of a take on the idea of fuel polishing, where there's a machine, you know, there's a specific part of the fueling process when you're putting diesel onto a ship, where they run it through filters, whether it's centrifugal or paper based, to get all of the contaminants out of the fuel before it goes into the boat, or before it goes from the boat into the engine. But it's man, it's a weird idea, and it's got to be driving Samsung nuts right now.
I would imagine so. Yes. You would think, I'd be curious. You would think that there would be, you know, some other SSD vendor that's kind of capitalizing on this, because Samsungs have been the best sellers for a long time. But we haven't seen anybody kind of jump up and either take any kind of aggressive marketing stance like you see in the GPU wars. But it was, you know, that would be something that I would have expected, you know, OCZ to maybe do before the Toshiba acquisition there. But everybody seems to be a little bit more polite in this market than in most.
Well, give it time.
Yeah.
I mean, the prices are in some ways are lower these, and it's such a memory is such a commodity. I think anybody who makes memory is just trying to figure out a way to sell it. While we're talking about less polite markets, the GPU market sees a 20-point swing in 2014. Nvidia gains, AMD falls. Ouch? Question mark.
Yeah, that's not really a question. It's a pretty big ouch. So if you look, what's important in that table there is the Q4 2013 result in the middle and the Q4 2014 result in the left. Those are the ones that are worth noting, right? Your AMD at the end of last year, I'm sorry, at the end of 2013 had 35% market share versus 65% essentially for Nvidia. And now at the end of 2014, according to this report from John Petty, it is 76 to 24%.
Wow.
Which is a 10-point, AMD loses 10 points, Nvidia gains a little bit more than 10 points, and thus a 20-point swing occurs. And keep in mind that this is I would not have guessed this, you know, if in the middle of 2014 had you asked me what was going to happen through this, it would have been the other direction maybe, or staying the same, because AMD had better price per performance cards They had bundles. They were doing aggressive bundling with games. They had kind of a very outward-facing and vocal marketing effort, and they were making good stuff. And you know, the GTX 980, 970 released in September of this year, and it just accelerated things, is what it looks like, right? Because it only got worse for AMD there and better for Nvidia, and it's an interesting debate and discussion to have about what does that mean then. What does AMD need to do to fix it, and then why didn't all of those things, like having a faster card for less money, change things around? And I think it's proof that consumers are interested in more than just that, right? They're not. There are some consumers that only focus on what's the budget, what's my budget, what's the most performance I can get, and then there are gamers that are interested in, like, well, what's the experience using it? What is this G-Sync thing? What it was 3D Vision? What about you know, GeForce experience or the driver iteration releases, and you know what the online claims of driver stability are for one party or the other, and those types of things clearly added up to a down year for AMD, and they can't really survive like this for much longer. And we don't want it to be an Intel AMD processor battle again for AMD and Nvidia GPUs. We don't want there to be one that is just clearly the dominant leader and looks like it's going to be that way forever. We want this to be closer than this if you're a consumer, because you want that to push things along in the right direction. So I don't know. I don't know what to take away from it other than that. You know, it hasn't been all good news for Nvidia, obviously, in the last month or so, but this part was good news for them. You know, how that gets spun later, we'll see. But this part was good news. For them.
Yeah. Well, we still haven't figured out who's paying for those returned 3.5 plus 5.
That's true. Very true.
Gigabyte GPUs. Windows Update installs GeForce 349 to 6.5 with WDDM 2.0. Scott wrote this up on PC Per. Update 2. Outside sources have confirmed to PC Perspective that this driver contains DX12 as well as WDDM 2.0. They also claim that Intel and AMD have DirectX 12 drivers available through Windows Update. After enabling iGPU graphics on my i7 4790K, the Intel HD 4600 received a driver update, which also reports as WDDM 2.0 and DX Diag. I do not have a compatible AMD GPU to test against, just a couple of old Windows 7 laptops, but the source is probably right, and some AMD GPUs will be updated to DX12 2.
Yep.
So this is exciting.
It's almost here. DX12 is almost here. I mean, this release, if you had an NVIDIA GPU, would give you the newest NVIDIA driver that has DirectX 12 built into it. If you had an AMD card, you would get the latest version of the AMD driver that has that built into it. And if you had an Intel graphics, integrated graphics, you would get that driver. So now you have DirectX 12 on the OS. You have DirectX 12 drivers. You just don't have any content to test with it yet. So, and I don't think it's any coincidence that this happens while the Game Developer Conference starts Monday in San Francisco. So
I smell emerging demos.
yeah. And the unfortunate part for me is, so I'll be out there for GDC, but I won't have access to all the hardware to test the things that are assuredly going to be released next week. And so it's one of those times where you travel for work and you actually fall further behind on work.
See, so because I'm the better part of 2,000 miles away from you, I feel comfortable in looking deeply into my webcam and saying, you know, Ryan, if you were dedicated to your craft, you would pack those machines up and bring them with you to California.
Nope. Can't do it. Won't do it. Get it get a Pelican case, stick a gaming PC in there with an AMD, 290X and a GTX 780 Ti. Is that a thing? 980. Get a GTX 980.
Do it,
I could do that. You're right. Right, and a monitor, and keyboards, and now just
know what? Just pack the basically strip a machine down, dump the hardware into the case, cut a slot for an extra GPU, buy a monitor when you're out here, or borrow one from me. You'll be good to go, man.
That's true. Is that what's the computer store there across from the Moscone? Is that still there?
Central Computer.
Central. Okay. All right. Yeah.
We got you covered, man.
I'll just do the loaner program. That'll be fine.
See, I will bring a lovely monitor to your hotel room. It'll be great. Oh my goodness, game developer
Just what I want to do.
Or next week. God, you run benchmarks day and night already. You may as well do it while you're traveling. Nvidia faces class action lawsuit for the GeForce GTX 970. This you knew this was coming. You know, it was. I was laughing. Somebody I know was surprised at some of the reaction to by various gigantic companies on the decision that the FCC would do Title II to make internet access a public utility so they could regulate it. Of course, everybody's going to start doing lawsuits because they want to do it their way because they can make more money charging everybody in every direction. So no, I am not surprised that Nvidia faces a class action lawsuit for the GeForce GTX 970. They didn't make something clear in their marketing and or box data or sales data. Ergo, some group of lawyers somewhere is going to go, we can sue these guys. Boom. Sorry.
Yeah. I know. There's a lot of ways you could make this a political thing as well. Just a general idea about class actions and whether or not they're effective and who they benefit and all that stuff. But it is still a pretty serious thing for Nvidia at this point to have to defend against. And I take this as somebody whose story on this issue is referenced in the filing itself a couple of times. Yeah. So it's an interesting read. If you go to the story on PCPro.com and then we link to the scribed post where they list it, it is a public filing, so you can just look through and read the whole thing, which I've done a couple of times. And their basic. Let me go to the part here where they read the section called facts, which it's a law document, so take that for what you will.
Right.
So the claim is, so it's actually a suit against both Nvidia and Gigabyte, and it's only reason it's picked Gigabyte is because whoever was the initial filer bought Gigabyte cards, I guess, right? And I assume that if this goes through, it would be to all of either only Nvidia or all of Nvidia's partners as well as Nvidia. But some of the requirements here are some of the, what do they call them here? Let's see. The material misrepresentations include. NVIDIA lists the specifications as, quote, the standard memory config is, quote, 4 gigabytes. And an example is attached in Exhibit C. Gigabyte states on its website that it is a 256-bit memory interface with the best 4 gigabyte GDDR5 memory. That NVIDIA's reviewer's guide sent to all media intended to review, repeat the specifications of, describe, and promote the GTX 970. NVIDIA stated that the GTX 970 had 2 megs of L2 cache and 64 ROPS. And then the product packaging still quoting the 4 gigabyte side of things. So there's two things that they're claiming here. One is that it's not truly 4 gigabytes, or it's not truly a 256-bit memory bus. And then that there was a misrepresentation or they lied about the 2 megs of L2 cache and 64 ROPS. I think those are two very different categories because they were either lying or incorrectly stated the 2 megs of L2 cache and the 64 ROPS. Like that is clearly the case. But is it truly 4 gigabytes of memory and is it truly 256-bit memory bus? That is where you get into this kind of grounds of discussion, right? That is much more complicated than that. And then, so if you assume that maybe that's too wishy-washy to be accurately portrayed, then you go with the stuff that you can definitely prove that they definitely said that it was 2 megs of L2 cache. They definitely said there were 64 ROPS. And is there material problems, is material effect on the consumer based on those specifications? And I think that again is something that somebody would have to prove, that those materially affect the performance, that somebody would have. They talk about in here. Legalese is amazing to me. It's so interesting to read. That say a reasonable consumer who would purchase these products would likely be misled into believing the 970 functioned using a full 4 gigabytes of VRAM, 64 ROPS, 2 megs of L2 cache, when in fact that is not the case. That's the type of thing that I have imagined since all this stuff started happening, that rooms full of lawyers at NVIDIA's offices and rooms full of executives and CEO Jensen are sitting there debating these facts. What can we prove? What can we say? How are we going to have to settle with this? Right.
Right.
And if you search the document, you will see PCPro.com mentioned at least twice, which is it's both. It's like, oh, somebody reads the story, and second, it's like, I've been through this a couple of times in my career, and I really don't want to have to go through the process of being subpoenaed and having to go do depositions and all that other crap, because it's a huge waste of time for just about everybody except the lawyers involved. So,
and that's who loves them so much.
Yeah.
Class action lawsuits. I you know, it was funny. A car insurance provider I worked for turned out to be maliciously overcharging pretty much everyone in the state of California they worked with, and that turned into a $3,000 check for me and everybody else who had them during the particular time period, and a significantly improved rate on my car insurance moving forward. So, you know, there are points where class action lawsuits I think make sense, or if you're dealing with a giant company that has been doing things like polluting or, you know, beating people down with sticks or whatever the lawyers want to equate their behavior with. I don't know. It's you know, it's an interesting problem that is slowly being resolved through actions of Congress in ways that you either approve or don't approve of. Interesting box showed up, much to my delight and surprise. The virtual press event from Motorola. And inside this box was this little guy, which is the new Motorola Moto E, which is a Snapdragon 410, a quad-core processor, which is a big, healthy jump up, both in the sort of processor technology, or well, it's just a much better processor, and it has more cores. Let me put it the simple way. They upgraded the memory on the Moto E from 4 gigabytes to 8 gigabytes, which is a big deal because the Moto E was pretty much impossible to use for much of anything other than as a phone in the original 4 gigabyte configuration, because the majority of that was taken up by the operating system install. You've got micro SD card slots inside of this. It's a 4.5-inch screen up from a 4.3-inch screen, and like a 2900 milliamp hour battery. I'm kind of curious how the slightly larger screen, they call it QHD. It's like a 960 by 540 screen. It's not the best screen, especially once you get off-angle viewing, but it does look pretty good. You know, it's funny because I've seen some screens that are just such ridiculously high resolution that I'm like, oh, hey, pixels. Not that they're particularly noticeable, and I'm exaggerating somewhat. But what's amazing is the performance is great. They saved money by not putting a flash on the camera, so you're gonna have to go with the Moto G to get a flash with your camera. And of course, it's a 5 megapixel camera. And a VGA selfie camera on the front side, which also is unlit. So you will need to be in a sunny or well-lit environment. But it's a really nice phone, and it's a new Snapdragon X5 for the 4G LTE. So they're claiming like support, you know, obviously theoretical max, 150 down, 50 megabit, not megabyte. But I got to say, for $150, this is a pretty fantastic phone. $150 off contract, I should say. So I gotta say, you know, I said this before about my Moto. This is basically a faster phone than the Motorola G I bought last summer for $50 less. And unlike the current Motorola Gs, if memory serves, the current Motorola Gs don't offer 4G LTE. A 3G LTE version will be available with dual core Snapdragon, I want to say 200 processor for like $120. But it is, what amazed me is the build quality is just fantastic. It's got some heft to it. It feels good in the hand. I got to say, Motorola's doing some nice things with their phones right now. And if you're looking for some performance on your processor, and you know, a Qualcomm Snapdragon 410 is a really nice processor to put in a phone this inexpensive. You know, and it was funny. It was like, it's so small, and I'm like, well, it still had a bigger screen than my last iPhone, and it's really not as small as I think it is, because, you know, holding it up next to my iPhone 6, it's really not that much smaller. But for some reason in the hand, it feels, you know, possibly because the curve fit your hand, you know, it just feels good in your hand. So props to Motorola for continuing to make some nice, affordable phones. You know, you've heard me whine about this before. I want to see better cameras in Android devices. And those are coming at the high end, and they will be trickling down over time. So props to Motorola for getting the new one out, and props for putting a badass processor in that phone. And yay, 4G LTE. I was also laughing because apparently the SIM card they put in here, the number that was assigned to the SIM card they put in here, was recently used by somebody with an affinity for pawn shops and being called by 1-800 numbers.
All right. Okay.
Because like you know, I fired it up. And the first thing I get is like a text message from a pawn shop, and I was like, "Well, that happened."
Yeah, the numbers are amazing. Yeah.
So I'm kind of tempted to start calling numbers back, and I'm mostly tempted to not call the numbers back.
Don't do that.
Yeah, it's funny. The other thing we looked at Tech Thing this week is a couple of digital analog converters from High Resolution Technologies, and they have a Kickstarter project going for their IDSD. This one's designed to work with the USB camera cable with a lightning connector, and then they also have another one that's designed to work. I mentioned this earlier with you know, Android or Windows or OS 10, either through USB or micro USB, which led to me going on to an insane sort of diversion on DACs and DAC quality and whether it's the headphone amp or the DAC and what's going on in there. But I will put everyone, including everyone inside the Twit house, if I start going nuts on that subject, because there are a few things more boring than listening to me talk about turning zeros and ones back into analog audio. But yeah, it was good, though. I love listening to stuff that sounds really good. Also, I love eBay this week. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Fair enough.
Picked up a $300 set of headphones with a broken cable for $65. And then I just swapped the cable, and they worked fine. So
Weird how that works.
yay, eBay. It's awesome when it works that way, because sometimes you buy something and it turns out to be really trashed, far beyond any description. Which brings me to @bsanbizzle. Who tweets, is it time to buy an SSD or wait for M.2? Will M.2 be superseded in the near future? Let me know if you discuss. We're discussing. And I think I actually answered this on Twitter because it's an interesting subject because, you know, I was talking about the laptop I'm using right now, and I want to upgrade the MSATA drive in it to make it huge. And it gets interesting because M.2 is essentially a form factor. And to quote the Wikipedia entry, formerly known as the Next Generation Form Factor, or NGFF, M.2 is a specification for internally mounted computer expansion cards and associated connectors. So the point of it is that it basically it is one connector to rule them all in the darkness behind them. It replaces the MSATA form factor. It replaces the PCI Mini Express card, PCI Express Mini card physical layout. There's a great write-up on Ars Technica that actually just came out a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Andrew Cunningham wrote it up. Understanding M.2, the interface that will speed up your next SSD. And it's great because the first picture on that is an A and E keyed Wi-Fi card, then two B and M key SSDs, and an M keyed SSD. So essentially, you know, it's going to replace all of the form factors inside of your PC, except they're not all universal, depending on what you want to plug into them. It'll support SATA. It'll support PCI Express. And that's kind of a big deal moving forward.
That's the complicated part, is that you can have a SATA-based M.2 slot in card and device, or you can have a PCI Express-based M.2 slot, and some like in the Nook, it's actually capable of both, right? You can plug in a SATA-based M.2 or a PCI Express-based M.2, but on some motherboards we've had, that's not the case. You're limited to one or the other.
Yeah, quote, M.2 can connect directly to the PCI Express bus, but different pins can be used to connect to the USB 2.0 and USB 3.0 buses, SATA 3, DisplayPort, and a variety of other less prevalent storage buses. If you want to start searching on that, you'll get into obscure dark corners of the internet really quickly. Quote, cards with one notch at the bottom are keyed for one specific kind of connector. Cards with two notches can be used in two different kinds of connectors. You know, it's interesting, right? So, go ahead.
I was going to say, if the question is, will M.2 be superseded in the near future? I don't think so. No. In fact, M.2 is just kind of now coming into its own, right? You know, the Z97 boards and the X99 boards are kind of the first ones to really have M.2 on it. it's not as necessary on a desktop platform as it is in a mobile platform or super small form factor device like the Nook because of its, you have room for a 2.5-inch drive or 3.5-inch drive or whatever you want.
Right.
But I think we will see M.2, in particular M.2 PCIe, grow significantly throughout 2015.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch because you look, there's like A, B, E, and M. M.2 boards essentially, or cards. A or PCI Express times 2, USB 2.0, I2C DisplayPort by 4. B is PCI Express x2, SATA, USB 2.0, USB 3.0, audio, PCM, IUM, SSIC, and I2C. Again, I'm quoting from that article, understanding M2, the interface that will speed up your next SSD. That's on Ars Technica. E will be PCI Express by 2, USB 2.0, I2C, SDIO, UART, and PCM. And then M, M2 M cards or M keyed cards will be PCI Express 4-lane, and they will be SATA interfaces. So
sure, it makes sense. No, just write all that down. I don't see any issue with that in any capacity. You should be fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's like, and it's, what this will be, it'll be like you buy a Nook-sized object or you buy a laptop and you're going to be looking for the next generation Wi-Fi, right? Because like A cards are going to be Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular cards. B cards are going to be SATA and PCI Express SSDs. E cards will be Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular cards again. And then M cards will be, PCI Express SSDs. Those will be the fast ones, the awesome ones. Yeah, it's a good read, and yes,
sounds like it.
Sam Bizzle, you're good to go with M.2, at least until they announce the successor,
which we haven't heard of yet. So PCI Express and NVMe is kind of like the progressive standard for storage, and M.2 will support PCI Express and NVMe, so you should be good to go in that direction.
Yeah, things are going to have to explode in a really serious way otherwise.
Yep.
Yeah. At Don Brubaker tweets, the best way to do 6 monitors on one PC. And I'm giggling at the moment because they're like, this is why Matrox was that 0.01% of that John Petty part. I don't know why he's still tracking S3, which is 0% of the market, but I think it's maybe
it's only
tradition.
Mathematically 0.00%. There are still some cards being sold. You might be able to count them like on your hands, but it's only a mathematical, it's a rounding issue at that point. Best way to do 6 monitors on one PC is 2 video cards.
Right.
There was a 7970 iFinity 6 edition, I think, that actually had 6 mini DisplayPort connections on it that could do 6 outputs at one time. That card is either impossible to find or is not made anymore. I'm sure it's not made anymore, but it's probably impossible to find. Your best bet is to go with, like, NVIDIA cards will support 4 displays each. And I think AMDs are limited to 4 displays as well now, like a standard single GPU card. Now, you don't have to go with high-end cards for this to happen. You just need to make sure you get a card that has the display output connectivity that you need. So, you could get a GTX 960 from NVIDIA that has HDMI 2.0, right, which is a benefit for you in the long run. But it'll have, depending on which vendor you get, it could have HDMI, DVI, and 2 DisplayPort, right, or some combination like that. And so that's going to be the complicated part, is if you have 6 identical monitors that you want to use the same connection type with, like 6 DisplayPort connections, you would probably need 3 video cards to do 2 each, or you need to start looking for
like a Matrox to go or something like that.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't do that. I would go with an MST hub, right? That is a multi-stream transport hub that is supposed to let you connect. You connect one cable to a single DisplayPort connection on your PC, and then it breaks out into 3 or 4 displays, I think. Maybe it's 3. So you'd have to have 2 of those connected to 2 display ports on your graphics card. Then it breaks out into 3 displays each. And that's a DisplayPort 1.2 feature or 1.1a. I forget what it was. They're hard to find. Let me see if I can. MST Hub is what you want to get. Amazon seems to list a couple of them here. Yeah, so you can get like a StarTech mini DisplayPort 1.2 to triple head display multi-monitor MST hub for $99. Right. So Acell sells one for $79 to go to 2 display ports. The StarTech triple head seems to be the one that's, it's got fairly good reviews, and it's mini DP to 3 full-size display ports. So you could be able to, or 1 full-size display port to 3 display port, depending on which one you want. So you can get that for $100, but you have to get 2 of them and then 1 video card. But if you don't care what connection type you have, if you have a monitor that has DisplayPort, NDVI, and HDMI, then you could use all the cables out of the back of your video card and connect them up that way too. So lots of complicated of ways to look at it, but you can do it. You can do it. But I think the single card option is not ideal in my opinion. Yeah.
Good point. We got a question in the chat room who asked, I think it was Wiggs who asked if Motorola was now part of Lenovo. And yeah, that was finalized back in October of 2014.
And quick reminder to people, emails, Twitch at twit.tv, TWiCH at twit.tv. We need some more emails sent to that with your questions. Most of the time what I get there now is like just an ungodly amount of spam and LinkedIn requests now at this point. So send in your legitimate questions about hardware situations that you need help with. Or you can obviously hit us up on Twitter as well at Patrick Norton and at Ryan Shrout. Now, obviously, that's where we got our questions from today. We're not biased in one direction or the other. Just saying. Make sure we get that email address out there.
Yes. It was funny. We talked about the SSID, the SIM card hack, SIM card company that was hacked. So Snowden releases more information from the NSA. This is the NSA and the British intelligence units that hacked into what basically amounts to the world's largest SIM manufacturer, and it sucked down a lot of the encryption data on that. And according to the SIM manufacturer, they did their own internal analysis, and Gemalto says there was no evidence of mass encryption theft because apparently they have sort of an air gap, an air wall in between the cool SIM manufacturing security network and the one that was accessed. But they claim everything's fine. The security industry, of course, says, no, actually, it's not, which is pretty much how computer security arguments usually work.
Yeah.
But, Gemalto says, no. We've looked into this. Everything's cool. No 3-letter or 4-letter government agencies in the U.S. or Britain have access to the security keys.
I hope so. Or I hope not, I guess.
Yeah. I think Christopher Segovian, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but he does some really interesting tweets about security. He's a pretty serious security professional. And what I like is one of the best tweets I've ever read. Gemalto, a company that operates in 85 countries, has figured out how to do a thorough security audit of their systems in 6 days. Remarkable. And Matt Blaze, who's an associate professor of computer and information science at the University of Pennsylvania, is quoted in the Register.co article on the Gemalto break-in. Quote, Gemalto is surprisingly confident that it now knows exactly the scope of the GCHQ/NSA penetration that it didn't detect in the first place.
Nice.
So Gemalto also said the SIM keys would only allow the monitoring of 2G communications and that 3G and 4G calls were secure. So basically, security professionals are calling bull snark on that extraordinary 6-day security analysis. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. PCPro.com, anything exciting and amazing and awesome and super cool coming up that you can tell us about? Or is it all secret and under wraps at this point, Ryan?
No, I don't even know anymore. GDC will be next week. I'll be out there at GDC, so expect some GDC news to come. DX12 will be the big push. Mantle, FreeSync, G-Sync, all that kind of discussion will be out and about there. NVIDIA's having a launch event for something. Some people theorize they're going to release a VR headset. I do not think that's the case, but I could be wrong. I don't think that's the case. I don't That's it. I'm just going to leave it with GDC. Check PCPro.com for GDC news and information. I think there'll be other stuff, but I'm blanking right now.
Blanking right now.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Minutemen song. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so I got hands-on with the Motorola Moto E this week, the DAX. Shannon's got some really cool ways to reuse your old Android phone. We kept things busy. It was a snappy edition of TechThing this week. You can find that at techthing.com or youtube.com/c/techthing, TEKTHING.com. Yeah, and it should be interesting. Shannon's doing her first Raspberry Pi project in a while. She's building an emulator. She's getting her ROM on, which led to a furious search on archive.org, at which point she realized the entire collection of ROMs was over 42 gigabytes and was not going to fit on her laptop. So I suspect in the near future, she's going to be the same search that I was, looking like, Crucial mSATA, Samsung mSATA. Wow, 500 gigabytes for $220, which just makes me happy. So this laptop is getting a makeover. And yes, people, there are external enclosures for your old mSATA drives, just so you know.
Cool.
And on that bright and cheerful note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on This Week in Computer Hardware.